Hi, I'm making a survival crafting game where you play as the only sentient being in the whole galaxy, a robot. Your goal is to terraform Mars and bring life back to it. So far, I added a temporary character, made it move around, procedurally generated a huge and totally empty planet, and added an atmosphere to make it feel like we are actually on Mars. In the last devlog, I also asked for your thoughts about the walls surrounding the planet, and you guys did not disappoint. I got awesome feedback, like making the planet spherical, connecting both sides together, or even adding a giant worm-like creature that eats robots if you try to leave. I've noted all of it and will definitely revisit the world generation later on. But you can't call it a survivor crafting game if there is no crafting, and you can't craft anything without gathering materials. So in today's devlog, we are fixing that. First, I needed a list of resources to use in the game. I researched minerals and metals that could realistically exist on Mars. Since humanity haven't brought back a soil sample yet, most of this is based on images and educated guesses. Turns out, Mars isn't that different from Earth in terms of planetary composition, so I can use some familiar materials. This is the list I ended up with. It will probably change and evolve over time, but it's a solid starting point. You will gather these materials in different ways. Minerals like iron, copper and silica can be mined from resource deposits scattered around the planet, but your robot can only mine small deposits. Bigger nodes and rare metals will need mining drills or even small mining colonies, which I'll explain in a bit. Carbon and butadiene will be collected and processed from the atmosphere using machines. Steel will be gathered by exploring Mars and finding remnants of past human colonization efforts. These will also play a big role in the story, but more on that in future videos. Regolith will be collected directly from the ground, kind of like how you gather plants in Satisfactory. And finally, resources like water, soil and oxygen will be used later as you progress with terraforming. Now that I know what types of resources I'm working with, I'm starting with iron, copper and silica. I need 3 resource models and 3 deposit models. I try to mimic how they look in real life, but since Mars doesn't really have visible deposits like that, I had to use my imagination to make something that fits the world. These are the final models. Time to get them into the game. If you remember from the last time, I used Poisson distribution for scattering rocks. It's also great for placing resource deposits. I built a configurable distribution script. I can add as many resource types as I want, and it will handle distributing them in the world. The key setting for me here is the distance between deposits. This helps me control how close or far apart these deposits are. There is also a setting to keep a deposit isolated from other objects, which will be really useful for special resources. For mining, I decided to go with a laser-based system instead of tools. Power is the main survival mechanic in the game, so using energy to mine creates a nice trade-off for players. But there is another reason. I want rovers in this game. You will be able to attach modules and move them around. With them, you can build portable mining rigs and bring them with you as you explore. To make mining work, I need 4 things: a script for the logic, an animation for the robot, a laser effect, and a way to spawn the mined resources. Let's start with the animation. As you can see, the robot can now perform actions. When you get close to something, it becomes interactable. Next, the laser. I found a great particle effect that fits perfectly. It was tricky to get it to hit the rock properly, but after some tweaking, it works. And finally, the mining logic. It's nothing fancy. It removes the deposit from the world and spawns the resource. But the ending felt a bit anticlimactic, so I added a small mining particle effect to make it feel better. Before fully adding copper and silica, I want to explain how deposits work. Each deposit can hold multiple resources. Right now, iron always gives 1 unit, but copper and silica can give 1, 2 or 3. This is decided during distribution. I also want players to know how big a deposit is just by looking at it, especially since power will be limited early on and you will need to choose which deposits are worth mining. So, I created multiple versions of the deposit models in Blender. They are visually distinct enough for now, but I might tweak them later. Let's test everything in the game. Great! I like it. Now, I need a way to collect the resources lying around. I have 2 options. I can either build a UI inventory or go fully physical, like an astroneer. I think the second option is the better fit for my game, because this way everything you own is always visible. You don't need to remember what's in your inventory because it's right there. The downside is though, you can only carry a few items, but I can balance that by requiring fewer materials for crafting. Time to give the robot a backpack. Even though it hurts me, I will be replacing the Jammer character soon, so I made a temporary backpack in Blender and added some slots to hold items. After attaching it to the character, it's floating. That's because I added to the character model instead of the avatar rig. Quick fix, and now it looks much better. Now that we have actions, let me show you something cool. Ready? Here it comes. You see, UI has never been my strong suit, but I spent long hours building what you see now. I was proud of it. I even started mocking up other ideas for other objects like terraforming and power. But once I tried it in game, I hit a big problem. The UI assumes each object only has one possible action. For example, the rock just shows collect, but what if that action needs more information? And what if this object will have more than one action? Also, I develop mostly in Unity's tiny editor window. There, this looks nice and small, but when I built the game and ran it full screen, this UI took up way too much space. So in the end, I decided to scrap it and go back to the drawing board. After some thinking, I realized the problem was putting all the info and actions in the same place. Also, there is just too much text all around. So the new plan is to separate them and make the info presented in a much simpler way. Let's start with actions. Actions will now appear in a panel at the bottom center of the screen instead of on top of the object. This way, players' eyes will always know where to look in the screen, and also I can show multiple actions in multiple lines. It looks much better. Next, for object info, I redesigned it to show more visuals and less text. I also switched the progress bar to a radial style because let's be honest, radial progress bars always look cool. Great, I'm really happy with this new version. Before adding the resource collection feature, I also wanted to highlight which object the player is near. I used a simple shader to add an outline, and now it's easy to see what you're interacting with. Collecting resources was simple to implement, it just moves the resource to the player and disables physics. But now there is a bigger problem. What happens if your backpack is full? I could just replace the first item in your backpack, but what if that item is important? So I added an option that lets you choose what to replace. This uses the new multi-line action panel, and I applied the outline shader here too. The backpack's outline is yellow to help differentiate it. Before I wrap up, there is one last thing, sound effects. I grabbed a few sound effects from my older games, made some tweaks and added them in, and here is the result. And that's it for this devlog. Hope you enjoyed the first real gameplay feature. Let me know in the comments what you think about mining and resources. Before you go though, if you like the game and you are not already subscribed, now is a great time, because next episode is going to be the biggest one yet. I will be bringing power to Mars. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.